I am Diane Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my feature author of the month of December, and of course, award winning author, Miss Cat Rambo. Again, Miss Cat, welcome back. And as usual, can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I am Cat Rambo. I am a writer of mostly fantasy and science fiction. I sometimes dip into horror or literary. I live in the US. My most recent book is Rumor Has It, which is a space opera, and I run the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, which is a little online writing community that also does some classes.
Yes, Miss Cat Rambo. Again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And today, what we gonna talk about?
We're going to talk about my book about writing. I feel
Yes.
like every writer ends up doing at least one book that's about the practice of writing. And mine is my answer to the question that people kept coming to me with, which was how do we tell the good ideas from the bad ideas? By which they meant how did they tell the ideas that they could turn into stories versus the ones that just sort of would fizzle out.
Yes.
And my answer is that there really aren't good stories and bad stories in terms of ideas. It's just that different ideas come in different forms. And sometimes it's easy to kind of figure out what's going to happen in the story. But sometimes if you've got something like just a title, it's harder to know what the story will be about.
Definitely. So, Miss Cat, how do you identify if an idea is worth pursuing as a draft?
I think that if you are interested in writing it, if you have even a little spark of interest, that is what's necessary. And there really isn't anything unique about, and I mean, one of the things that I came across in grad school was one of my teachers gave us in our workshop a lament. And the lament was a scribe who wrote, how can I write any stories? All of the stories have already been written. I can write nothing new. And he was writing in 300 BC. So
Mm,
this is not a, it's not, we're not discovering new minds of stories at any point. It's what the writer brings to the idea. It's what their kind of unique perspective, their unique experience, their unique outlook on life that ends up making the story worthwhile.
what steps can you take to clarify a vague idea into a clear concept?
It's good if you can figure out what is sometimes called the log line. And the log line is just describing the story and what happens in it in one or two sentences, and outlining, there is a guy in a town and he
Yes.
goes outside and finds bugs on his garden and then he has to fight the bugs. I mean, that's a very bad example.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
but you need to know kind of uh, what's happening, who's it happening to, and where is it happening.
How important is the research in shaping an initial idea into a draft?
Say that again.
How important is research in
um,
shaping?
well, I think that depends, because I think research is one of the ways writers can end up procrastinating on writing,
Yes.
so they do researching instead. um, but sometimes also you can do research that isn't for any story that you're writing. You're just sort of reading in a particular subject, and you ended up coming out with all sorts of interesting story ideas. And I think that is very fruitful research. I think I don't think you have to do a lot of research before you write. If you're writing a short story, if you're writing a novel, you might want to do substantially more research. I'm working on a novel that's, well, I'm going to be working on a novel next year that's set in 1976. And I think I am setting myself a couple of months actually to spend reading local history books and trying to kind of figure out what happened when.
So, what strategies can help overcome writer's block during the brainstorming phase?
Oh, well, I think one of the things that really helps you overcome writer's block is remembering that you are writing when you're brainstorming, you're just writing for yourself. You
Yes.
don't have to worry about it being publishable. You're just generating ideas. You can make it pretty later. So don't worry about making it wonderful or making it publishable. Just get down the ideas while you can during the brainstorming.
So, how do you encourage, or how do you create a strong outline to guide your writing process?
Oh, well, so like, I guess it depends on what your definition of a strong outline is. Because I have some friends, like my friend Django Wexler, who I was mentioning before the show. Like Django writes very long, detailed, 25,000 word outlines for his novels, whereas I write maybe a page that talks about what's going to happen in the first third of the book, and then I write that first third, and then I outline the next third, and then I write that, and then I outline again. Because one of the things about outlines is so often when you're writing, the outline ends up changing, or you end up moving away from where you thought it was going to go. And that is absolutely a valid thing to happen. And if that happens, I think you should go in that direction and kind of change the outline as you need to. I think you really want a kind of weak, flimsy outline that you can easily move away from.
Definitely. So, what are the key elements of an effective writing schedule?
Oh, I think one element is kind of make it a ritual, make it something that's regular. Like I get up in the morning, I go get my coffee, and then I come back and I write.
Yes,
And kind of trying to have, and I have, kind of the coffee tells me that now I'm back at the desk with it. It's time to start writing. But the other thing that I think is really key is try to avoid the internet. Uh, don't check your email before you write. Don't check social media before you write. Get your writing out of the way and use the social media to reward yourself for having done some writing. Um, when I first started doing this, I always had this fear that if I waited until noon to open my email, like, what if I missed something incredibly important? This has never happened yet. If it's something that's an emergency with my family, they're going to text me or call me. So I don't need to worry about the email that much. So that's
that.
two things about to do an effective schedule.
So, Miss Cat, moving from idea to finished draft, which chapter of this book you want to share to us?
Um, I think the one that I really appreciate, or the one that I think is really fun, is it's the chapter on generating a story if you've just got a title.
Yes,
And because I think that's really interesting because sometimes you do get just a title and you have to sit down and figure out kind of like what is built in to the title. And one of the reasons that I particularly like that chapter is with each chapter I've included a story that got generated in that way. So I have a story that came out of just a title, which is appeared in Clark's World, gosh, a while back, called "I'll Gnaw Your Bones," the Manticore said. which I thought was just an absolute fabulous title. And I told it to my partner at the time, and they're like, "Oh, I don't like that title." And I was like, "No, I will write the story." And so, so I
Yes.
love that story because it came out of just a title, and part of writing it was looking at it and saying, "Okay, what sort of story does this title predict?"
So, how do you determine the appropriate tone and style for your draft?
Um, Usually it's not something that I worry about in the first draft because I kind of will let whatever emerges emerge, and it may be wildly uneven. But that's part of what revision is for, is going back and fixing it. If it's something like I want to get a particular tone, like say a Victorian literature tone or something like that, like when I was writing steampunk, I might do this. I sometimes will do some reading in 19th century literature just to kind of get that sort of that feel of that flavor and that the cadence of the sentences.
What role does feedback play in refining an idea before starting the draft?
Oh, I think it can be so valuable to have somebody to articulate your ideas to, and who just, even if they're just like, oh, that's an interesting idea, because often for a writer, it's just the act of saying aloud what it is that you want to write in the story that helps you figure it out. So I don't even know if I mean, I could be actually talking to the cat here
Yes.
and perhaps getting a good idea, better ideas of what I want to do. Um, so feedback is super useful if you've got somebody who can give it to you, but it's not absolutely necessary to have a smart being participating in it. You can just be talking to the cat.
So, how can you break your writing into manageable sections to stay focused?
Oh, I what I do is I set a timer when I sit down to write, and I write for 30 minutes. And I just kind of work pretty solidly for 30 minutes, and then at the end of the timer I get up and I move around and I go do some housework, or I go maybe cook something, or walk around the block or whatever, and then I come back and I do more half-hour sprints, and I try and do, I mean, for me, a day where I do like 3 or 4 half-hour sprints is a really good day, and I'm getting a lot of writing done if I'm doing that.
Yes, definitely. So, how do you balance creativity and structure when drafting?
Oh, I tend to just let the creativity go and worry about imposing structure later on. Um, Unless it's something, maybe where it's something where I'm using the structure to guide the writing, by which I mean I've chosen a really specific structure, like it's going to be told in the form of newspaper articles, or it's going to be, say, a particular poetic form or something like that. And in that case, I think that's sometimes really useful because that something about having those constraints inspires creativity.
So, Miss Cat, what techniques can help you to stay motivated throughout the writing process?
I think remembering to get up and stretch periodically, and not
Yes.
just go head down and work and work and work. I just finished up a manuscript that I sent off to my agent on Friday, and I could tell, like last week I was just, I'd sit at the desk and work, and then I really had to kind of like force myself to get up and go do something else because I just wanted to be done with the manuscript.
Yes,
Oh.
definitely. So, Miss Cat, what will be your advice again for those people want to enter to this industry?
I would suggest that write the stuff that you enjoy, write the stuff that you love, that makes you happy while you're writing it, because this is not an industry where you probably are going to make a lot of money, right? If you're going to go into an industry where you want to make a lot of money, like computer science or
Yes.
something like that would be much smarter. But, so if you're going to write, I do something that you really enjoy, do something that you love, and remember that you get to do with it whatever you like. You don't have to write to please anybody else. You just have to write to please yourself.
Yes. And stop procrastinating, people.
Yes. Oh God, yes.
If you have the passion to write,
Yeah,
and share to
yeah,
the world, just
yeah.
like Miss Cat Rambo. Now, award winning author. So, how important is setting deadlines for completing different stages of draft?
I think setting deadlines is very important. Um, I always try and set, like with the most recent book, I told my friends that were going to be my beta readers. I told them a definite day that I was going to give them the book. And so that made me finish it up in a way that I might not have if I was sort of like, oh, I'll get it to you whenever. Um, and getting the book off to my agent, I really had told myself I really wanted to get it to him by December 15th, and I actually got it to him a couple of days early. And that's it's important to set deadlines that occasionally you can exceed because then you feel very proud of yourself.
Miss Cat Rambo, again, thank you so much for another book to be published. We're looking forward for more books to come. So, what are the most common pitfalls to avoid when moving from idea to draft?
Um, I think the most common pitfalls, one might be feeling like you have to write consecutively. You have to kind of start at the beginning and write and hit the end. And you can, if you want to, skip ahead to a part that makes you feel excited to write it. It is okay to write sort of piecemeal and write the ending before you write the beginning. So that is the pitfall of the consecutive draft would be one that I would avoid. Um, and trying to write something that's publishable. Kind of sitting down to yourself and say, okay, I have to make it really, really good. And I think that telling yourself that whatever words come out have to be good is a good way to make sure that you don't write any words at all. So when I'm writing a story, I don't worry about it being publishable. In fact, I know it's going to be a crappy, terrible, awful first draft, but I also know that I'm good enough at revising and rewriting that I can turn it into something good. So I just write it. And of course, some stories are better than others, but I know that I can always turn out something that will be at least
Yes,
decent. Yeah.
definitely. So, what strategies can help to ensure your draft aligns with your original vision?
Oh, I think one thing that's really useful is before you sit down to write the story is maybe sit down and do a little meta writing, a little kind of writing about the writing and say, I think this is a story about X and Y, or the moments that I really think will be cool in this story are this, this, and this, and get down all the things that excite you, all the sort of that initial rush of ideas because they can fade. So it's important to get them as much of them down onto the page as you can.
So, again, Miss Cat, what are your short term and long term goals in writing?
My short-term goal is I just like to make sure that I've written something during the day because then I feel like I've done something productive. And my long-term goals are I want to keep doing a book or two every year, and keep writing stories, and that's pretty much it.
Yes, good luck to your goals, Miss Cat, and looking forward for more empowering books. How do you deal with self-doubt during the drafting process?
Oh, self-doubt is a terrible thing. Um,
Yes.
I think it's useful to save uh, one of the things I do is I save emails that people have sent me where they said they liked something or that they particularly enjoyed something. And so I have that little folder to kind of bolster my ego when
Mm.
it's necessary. But I think it's important to remember that as writers, we are very good about constructing our own narratives about feeling guilty and feeling ashamed and feeling bad because we don't write as much as anybody else, or we don't, we haven't done X or Y or whatever. And uh, don't don't write those stories. When you talk to yourself, be kind to yourself. Talk to yourself the way you would treat a cherished friend or a child, and don't kind of beat yourself up because you didn't get something done. For one thing, we are living in a really kind of weird and crazy world, and just making it through the day is a victory. So every word is an additional victory. So don't punish yourself. One of the things that I do is I never punish myself for not hitting deadlines, but I do reward myself for hitting them. I try to reward myself with something that I wouldn't cheat and get otherwise as well. Um, you know, so yeah, and you don't want to punish yourself, or because you don't want to associate writing with punishment. I think that's a good way to kind of stymie yourself as well.
Definitely. So, how can free writing or journaling help refine an initial idea?
Oh, it's a great way to do it. And I think one of the best times to do it is when you get up in the morning and you're still a little sleepy. You still got all those kind of dreamy chemicals floating around in your brain. And I think that is a great time to just pre-write, and don't worry about making sense. Don't worry about kind of editing as you go, but just get the thoughts down and write something that might not go in the story. Write as scenes that don't have to go in anywhere. Um, I think it's just really useful because you have what Kate Wilhelm called your silent partner, your unconscious mind, who brings you all sorts of interesting ideas and things. And the only way you really have of communicating with your silent partner is to write down the gifts that they bring you in order to say, yes, I value these, I appreciate these, please bring me more. So I think that free writing and free journaling is a great way to get a little time with your silent partner and appreciate them.
Yes. So, Ms. Cat, to sum up our discussion tonight, what is the best way to transition from a rough draft to a polished version?
Ah, well, it's good to put it away for let the story kind of like sit for a week, or if it's a novel, maybe a month, and then come back to it. And then I try to read through it once and sort of make a list of my big work items. Like if I need to move scenes around, or I need to add scenes, or need to perhaps make the ending make sense, that sort of thing. And then I do kind of the big ticket items, kind of like, stuff at the scene level. And then I
Yes.
move on to think about kind of stuff at the paragraph level. And then I move on to sentences. And then one of the last things I do is I read it out loud at least once. And that is how you get a truly well polished draft, because reading out loud, it helps you catch so many typos and repeated words that you don't get when you're reading silently. And it helps you figure out if your sentences sound nice when read out loud, because sometimes your reader is hearing them in their head, so you want that to be a pleasant experience.
Definitely. Miss Cat Rambo, again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And as I said, we are looking forward for more empowering books to come.
Thank
So,
you.
Miss Cat, can you please invite our listeners? to support all your books?
I totally invite them to support all of my books. The most recent is Rumor Has It. But come check out my website is catrambo.com, and there's a whole bunch of the books on there, and the writing community that I run. And it's a new website, so I'm super proud of it. Come take a look.
Yes, yes, people, let's support Miss Cat Rambo because if you support her, more, as I said, empowering books to come. So, Miss
Yay!
Cat, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
More to come, people. See you soon.